Well, good morning again, Tubaneros. You may think that the libertarian attempt to dismantle government is something new, but in reality, it's the descendant of a long line of reaction and counter-revolution going back some 350 years in the English-speaking world. And that means, yes, we're going to dig into the rotten root cellar of US&A history once again. The truth you will never hear from anyone funded by the Cato Institute or see displayed on the shelves of Walmart, and for good reason. In the mid-1600s, England had a civil war between Parliament with its insistence on the rights of Englishmen on one hand, and on the other, the upholders of proprietary privilege, royalists and lords of the land. During this time, several reactionaries from deeply feudal southwest England despaired of liberal government in London and besought themselves to the colony of Virginia. There they sought to recreate the unfettered feudalism of their ideals, unencumbered by parliamentary notions of commonwealth, and brought with them white servants to work their feudal estates or plantations. Most of their workers were farm laborers, also from southwest England, contracted into voluntary service for a period of 5 years or so, sprinkled with a good dose of transported felons, debtors, and kidnapped children. The origin of the word kidnapped, by the way, was in colonial Virginia. But as it was in fact the 17th, not the 14th century, these servants were freed after their contracts expired, necessitating the importing of more to keep the plantations going. And these ex-servants wanted in turn nothing more than to take up land as freemen themselves. The reactionary master class, calling themselves cavaliers, gentlemen entitled to ride a horse, like the French chevalier or Spanish caballero, grew nervous in proportion with the rise in the free white population, the demographics of democracy. Soon this rabble might call for parliamentary reform right in their own domain, the very thing they had fled England from, and soon the worst happened. Bacon's rebellion had nothing to do with revolting pork products, but rather the first revolution in North America. In 1676, Nathaniel Bacon, the leader of servants turned freemen on the frontier, which at this time included some freed black servants as well, led a revolution 100 years before the main event, a revolution that overturned the Cavaliers and Royalist Governor Berkeley in Jamestown, burned the capital to the ground, and was defeated only when the King's men of war put anchor at Chesapeake Bay, dispersed the new popular assembly by force of arms, and empowered Berkeley to hang 23 of the rebels. But out of this near defeat, the reactionaries learned new lessons, besides those brought over from the English Civil War. Never again would they be outdone by the demographics of democracy, nor would they suffer poor whites and poor blacks to be united against them ever again. Black slavery exponentially began replacing white servitude. The poor were to be played against each other on a racial basis, while feudalism would continue unabated, also on a racial foundation, with poor whites patronized into feeling common cause with the master class. In 1688, the reactionary Cavaliers received another near-fatal blow, the English Bill of Rights, also a century before the one we now know in the US&A. So what were they to do? The poor Cavaliers could no longer kidnap children or treat white farm laborers as animals, because these now officially had the rights of Englishmen, the very thing their fathers had feared and fought in England, and had fled England to escape. Well, the answer was already in the making. By 1700, white servitude had virtually disappeared. Black chattel slavery was dominant, not only in Virginia, but from the very first in South Carolina, founded in the late 1600s by planters from the Caribbean island of Barbados. Of course, this feudal society survived the passing of slavery. Its ideas of proprietary privilege for the master class remained part of a certain segment of American culture and have surfaced again in their most recent form in political and economic libertarianism and its political offshoot, the so-called Tea Party movement. What are the salient aspects of this culture? Well, first, that government, like the economy, should be the private domain of the privileged. Just as the master class were sovereign individuals on their estates, they were also the private executors of civil law upon their servants. Bureaucracy and officialdom existed only insofar as necessary to coordinate their group interests on a state level and to represent them as necessary at a national level. But in day-to-day affairs, they were the state, as a class and as sovereign masters upon their property. They loathed the idea of any government higher than their own strong, self-absorbed wills, and violently opposed the idea that those outside their class should govern them through the state, especially those they governed as masters. And so we see their so-called libertarian descendants today, seeking to destroy any government higher than the will of the master class, to turn affairs of state into their private business as much as feasible, which they consider to be nearly everything necessary to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In true Orwellian fashion, the ideology of feudal slaveholders is still packaged as states' rights, as they seek to dismantle both the state and the rights of the citizens it governs, still presented as protection of sovereign individuality for themselves, as masters, while herding and shearing the rest of society like chattel livestock. They still seek to destroy the state in the same way their forebears opposed Parliament and the original Bill of Rights, because they know that citizens with rights are an impossibility without a state to protect and enforce these rights. This is the irony of their belief that big government alone is the chief tyranny that can destroy freedom. But, to their credit, we do see a number of them opposing legislation like the Patriot Act, which, if enforced as written, would turn the U.S. state into an Orwellian nightmare. In fact, even the Koch brothers donated $20 million to the ACLU to fight it. But at the end of the day, away from their public spectacles, the likes of the Koch brothers and Governors Walker and Christie, like Governor Berkeley before them, they know their privileges are secured only by turning the majority into submissive, dependent employees, that is, servants. And they do this by enclosing the public domain of civic entitlement on a mass basis. The practical effect of their activism is still out to subvert the Bill of Rights. For the majority, just as it was in 1688, it's truly surprising how little really has changed in 3 friggin' centuries, and how predictable they are in their continuity. They'll militate against the way the state crushed David Koresh in his bin Laden-like compound in Waco, Texas, and rightly so, but turn around and applaud the crushing of public employees' rights to form unions of free association. And if a new Nathaniel Bacon decides to get a little porky and friendly challenge the master class, rest assured they'll drop all libertarian pretenses. The Patriot Act stands ready to hang 23 more rebels if necessary, or terrorists as we'd call them now. Just like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, it also authorizes extraordinary renditions. Uh-oh, to knock upon the phone. Hello? Abraham Lincoln, what are you up to these days? You know, this Congress is claiming to be so broke they just might have to shut your monument down. What's that? You wouldn't mind? Why? Because you feel nothing in common with this Congress of so-called Republicans who uphold the rights of masters to treat working men as serfs. Now, you don't want your marble fondled by the likes of John Boehner. Just give him a good dose of Nate Bacon instead. Ouch.